to another episode of Pod for Good. I am your Chief Philanthropist, Jesse Ulrich.
And I'm your Vice Admiral Philanthropist, Chris Miller.
And Pod for Good is the podcast where we speak to the amazing change agents working to make Tulsa a stronger and better place. Today we are speaking with Regina Tisdale, the founder of the Wayman Tisdale Foundation.
We talked about how the Wayman Tisdale Foundation helps uninsured Oklahomans with debilitating costs of prosthetics. We dive into the NBA and what it's like for the family of players and why music is so important to her and her family.
Please remember to subscribe and review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever podcasts are found. And if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, we will read it on air. So enjoy this wonderful conversation we had with Regina and a guest star who is in the background, who you'll hear from time to time. Excited to have Regina Tisdale, the founder of the Wayman Tisdale Foundation, on the podcast today. Hello, Regina.
Hi, guys.
So, basic question we always like to start off with is, in like 30 seconds or so, can you tell us what the Wayman Tisdale Foundation does?
In 30 seconds, okay, I'll be a sparse enough. No, I won't. Okay. In 30 seconds.
We won't count that against you.
What we do is we provide prosthetic devices for uninsured, particularly for the most part, Oklahomans. When Wayman and I went through our process, we did not know how expensive it was. So during that part of our lives, and we spoke with the persons that we use, Scott Savage Prosthetics. I think one day we asked Scott, how many people do you turn away? And when he told us how many he's able to help with grants and how many he turned away, Wayman looked at me and said, you know what, we're going to revamp our foundation. We're going to help, because we weren't finished with Wayman's process and we were already at $50,000. So with Savage, that's how we started. And we've not one time in this 9-year span have we had anyone that had an issue with cancer. All of ours have been diabetes, accidents, and things like that. But yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what we do. We help uninsured Oklahomans with prosthetic device needs.
So how do you find, or how do they find you?
There's a place on our website on waymantisdale.org. There's an application there, but for the first 5 or 6 years, we went through a ton of people through Scott Savage because there were so many that they would turn away. So initially, they would call us and say, "Hey, we have this person, and they're having a hardship, or they have partial funds," and so we, of course, have them to send letters into the foundation, and we'd read their stories and what happened, and that's how we get them.
You mentioned that you're focused specifically on uninsured. I've read that even insurance doesn't cover a lot of amputations of prosthetics.
Right. Just like I said earlier, depending on what you're doing, if it's above knee, below knee, that makes a difference from $5,000 to $10,000. Wow. And if your insurance only gives you $1,500, then you're stuck. And then with the $1,500, when you need to do, because there's a process, you go in and then you get a temporary prosthetic device, and then they go through this molding, and then you go through one sock, another sock. Well, that's something they have to put on it. And then if you're a diabetic person, then you deal with swelling and shrinkage and things like that. So by the time you finish, you may be at your third or fourth one. So all of that's money. So by the time you get to your final one, you could have spent $10,000, $12,000. And of course, we spent quite a lot for Wayman's, and thank God we had the insurance because Wayman was 6'9". So ours was a whole different thing for them to work through, figure it out.
I saw the picture of that prosthetic leg. I'm like, that's the largest prosthetic leg I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. So for the ones that only have $1,500, what we do is we get them through to the final prosthetic device that they'll have, with a few rules and regulations. Don't gain over 20 pounds, don't lose, because of course that makes a difference. And then we get them a few rehab lessons, on sitting in the car, getting out of the car, getting in the shower. So we get them up and moving. We really do. So
you mentioned that at the time, the foundation was maybe going to be focused on something else beforehand?
It was. Initially, when Wayman, we left Oklahoma and left OU, his foundation gave monies to students that were students and musicians, of course, because he was. And he used, it was always 2 high schools, and we primarily stayed north. So we would give scholarships to students that were athletes and musicians from, it was always Booker T in Central, a Booker T in McLean, a Booker T in Rogers, but every year.
Always Booker T.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did that for quite a few years. But then when we saw the cost involved in this, we just felt like this was something that was bigger, and we felt like it could go a longer way. I mean, it was something, although the music and of course sports was his life, this one just, it was different. It was different. Yeah.
There were other people and other foundations that do those things, but
absolutely
very few that help with the massive expense that is prosthetics.
Right. Because I think we're only aware of one other foundation that does what we do, at least in our area. And theirs is, they give them $1,500 and that's it. And you don't give Whopper $1,500.
I read that when Wayman was in the NBA, you were part of an organization, I think it was called Behind the Bench, where you were able to do some philanthropic work with that as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Wayman was, every team has a player's rep. And so, when it came time for collective bargaining, whatever business that we had. So Wayman happened to be that person for 2 teams that we were with. And so we would have these summer retreats. So at one point, one of the wives said, hey, why don't we start a group? And so, but Behind the Bench, we did things that involved women and children. So, when we would have a retreat, so to speak, where we were in Dallas one year, and we went to Children's Hospital, and then we thought, okay, that one wasn't good. We were all mothers, so we were bawling, and it was terrible. But what we would do was, during our biggest fundraisers were during All-Star Weekend, so we would even get our guys. Sometimes we'd do this big fashion show. We'd pull the guys in. And then as it grew, we were able to get certain celebrities outside of sports people. I mean, sports personalities. At Morgan Freeman, we had Debbie Allen. I don't know. She's a dancer. But anyway, we would get different guys, but we were our focus was women and children.
So your work with that, did that sort of prepare you for founding and helping run a foundation, or is it different types of work?
Absolutely not. I mean, just being totally transparent. No, it did not. When I tell you, when we started this foundation, I went to childhood friend, Miss Lisa Bell. I went to Marla Mayberry. I went to people that I knew were they'd been in the Tulsa community when I was away, and I knew what they did. And because when I tell you, this was so far above my pay grade, not that I got paid or that I do get paid, but Wayman used to say this thing, whenever he was interviewed and he was asked questions about his band and how good they were. And he said, really, I'm not really good. He said, but my supporting cast, the people around me make me look good. So my goal was to set out and find people that did this and they knew what it was all about. And then they would teach me. And it's so weird. We literally was sitting in St. John Hospital, and Wayman he and I together actually chose the board members. So everyone that we asked, everyone said okay, but we asked people that we knew that were already in the field. And so he didn't get a chance to do, but they taught me. And when I tell you, tears, crying, I'm not doing this. I don't get it. I'm lost. Again, this is above my pay grade. If you ask me for a task, like when I was Behind the Bench, Regina, this is what we want you to do. Even with me being one of the vice presidents, you can give me a task and I can fulfill it. I could do a job, but to be the person that was the name and I'm the one giving the marching orders, so to speak, I didn't like it. I was very, very cool being the person behind the scenes. I was married to someone that had a huge personality, in stature and and figuratively. He was, and the life of the party. And I was cool. being this one back here doing whatever I did. And I did a lot of things, but I didn't care if someone knew or not. Mm-hmm. So when I had to be pushed in the front, it was very uncomfortable for me. And I told myself maybe a year ago to stop saying, Regina, that this is not what you do. Because clearly I do. I do now, but for a long time, for years I did. I was like, as soon as I would get in the mic, this is not what I do. I'm very uncomfortable. That was the first thing that would come out of my mouth. So I finally said, stop it. Just stop it. Because you know what? Yes, you do. You do it. You may be apprehensive. You may be not a little nervous, a lot nervous when you initially start, but this is what you do now. So. Yeah.
So, can you tell a little bit about how your role has changed since when you initially found it and we're learning about it to what you do today?
One of the cool things is I put myself in a position, or we put ourselves in a position that I can have an executive director. So I did not have to cry at night and feel like, oh gosh, my baby is burning, or no, I'm serious. Initially caused so much distress because I wanted everything to work, because literally, now this did happen. I could hear, whenever I was nervous, I could hear Wayman saying, Gina, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. I heard that before I would step on stage. And so it did create a lot of distress. So we did finally get to a place where I could hire an executive director. And that has helped me so much. So now I do get to do what I'm doing today and or TV, which makes me nervous, but I do it. So what's changed is I do understand the philanthropic community a lot more. I realized, what have I learned? That Oklahoma City and Tulsa are so separated. Oklahoma City wants Oklahoma City money there, and Tulsa wants Tulsa money here. I still don't get that. I don't get it. And because of our OU ties, it's weird. It's weird. So I'm still trying to figure that part out, if you can't tell. But, so I'm more comfortable, and I guess now, the difference is I'm quite a bit more comfortable. I still, and I understand some things better, and gosh, I don't feel like I'm flying blind or solo finally. Yeah. But yeah. I still believe in that strong supporting cast.
So it's your executive director who can now cries at night, right? Just transfer that over.
I don't think he does. You know what? Young people are different. He's 33 years old, and he has, to me, it seems like 5 jobs. And I don't know how they do it, but
not well, I can tell you.
I wouldn't be able to, But the crazy is when I hired him, 3 other things opened up at the same time for him. But he took all 3, and so far so good. But I did tell him, I said, okay, I'm gonna give you a year, and I want to see, and if we're failing in at all, then we'll just see then what we need to do. But so far so good.
If we may tangent slightly back into Wayman Tisdale's NBA life, I have a couple questions about just, as a sports fan, you see players getting traded and signing contracts and whatnot. Very rarely do you ever think about the families that are constantly having to move around. And so I was wondering what was that like on you, on your children as you moved from Indianapolis to Sacramento and then to Phoenix?
This is the funny thing is Wayman growing up in Oklahoma, everybody in Oklahoma knowing Wayman Tisdale, didn't go into OU, so he's a hometown boy, made good, stayed home. When OU was, known for football, not basketball. And I remember his father telling him, if you're as good as you say you are, then you'll put basketball on the map at OU. And that's exactly what he did. And I thought it was so very cool. So it was fun. Then we go to the Pacers. So we get there, and I remember he flew in, and he called me, and I'm arranging to go, and he said, don't get on the plane. And I said, well, okay, okay. And then he called back. He said, my agent called and said that there's some contractual things going on. So I'm coming back home. Okay. And so then we get back and we get back, you go from everybody loving you and there's billboards in Norman's and One More Year, Wayman, people spend money for things like that. And now it's a job. So he's going back and forth. So we finally get there and then the press ate him alive. Now that was new for him. It was hard for him. It was hard for me. We literally stopped taking the paper. And now all these years later, we do not take a paper because beat writers are so horrible. So they were, he got to camp and he's overweight. He's not everything he said that they said he was. This is his, he's picked number 2 and he's not living up to what we want. And so finally we get in and things are going along just fine. We're sitting at home, gone to church, finished cooking dinner. We're sitting there, the phone rings. I answer the phone and I was like, wait a minute, this is Donnie Walsh. So he was the general manager. And, Wayman we looked at each other, I handed him the phone and I'm watching him while he's talking. And he was saying, oh, okay. Oh, all right. Click. And I looked and I said, what's going on? He said, I just got traded to the Sacramento Kings. I was like, And so I was like, traded? So okay, wait, what happens? And then literally 2 minutes later, phone rings again. I answer the phone. It's Bill Russell. Hey, Wayman, this is Bill Russell. You just got traded to Sacramento Kings. We are so excited about you coming. We want you on the first thing smoking in the morning. So all of this took about 20 minutes and your life is flipped. We have a kid in preschool and a 6-month-old kid. And so we're literally sitting, staring at each other. And it was like, whoa, what do we do? So the answer to the question is, it's horrible. But nobody sees this. And we were in the process we were in a home. We were having a home built. Wayman went to Donnie Walsh prior to building the house. And he said, look, what does it look like for me here? Am I going to be here? And it's like, he said, Donnie, look, I'm going to build a home. Is it okay for me? I want to know. Everything is cool. So we end up leaving Sacramento 2 weeks before getting into this new house. So now we have 2 houses to sell and he had to be on the first thing smoking the next day. So, and it just so happened that my baby sister was there because a trade date last February. So she graduated from Rogers and wasn't sure what she wanted to do. So she came and she would help us with the children. And, I remember Wayman saying, I don't know what's happening or what to look. I don't know what this looks like because it was something new for us. So he said, I want you to go with me. And so my baby sister said, okay, I have the children. I'll take them home. And Regina, you go, Wayman. And so we flew in, with these big heavy fur coats on and slept in the Sacramento. Like, whoa, well, it's hot. So I remember Bill Russell coming up and greeting us at the airport. And it's like, you guys won't need those coats anymore. And just kind of chuckle, and it's really, you leave everything you have or, in some instances, the wives, you'll stay back and the wife and her children, you're expected to, get everything ready. Now, they're nice enough that they do pay for you to move cross country or wherever you're going. But it happens that quickly, literally. It's that quick and you have to just get up and go. Because they've bought your contract. So if you were in practice here in Indianapolis, tomorrow you're going to be in practice in Sacramento. And that's how it works.
It's crazy. I know. Every time I see a player trade, especially if it's like coast to coast, I'm like, oh, the poor family.
Yeah. And it just so happened that Wayman because he went through the emotions of, oh my gosh, what did I do? They don't like me. Did I say something? He went through that because everybody loved Wayman. Mm-hmm. And so, by the time we were in Sacramento, our 5th or 6th year, and if rookies came in, he said, look, man, this is a job. Just realize that it's a job. You could be here today, gone tomorrow. You can get hurt. Someone will have your spot. But just, and I remember he started telling them, make sure the only time that you're upset is the 1st or 15th, your check doesn't show up. But otherwise, this is a job.
I thought it's a good life philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, with Wayman, he always had music to fall back on.
Right.
It seemed like in some ways, music maybe was even his bigger love than basketball was. And but a lot of players, I'm sure he interacted with, didn't have anything else. That was everything they had. It felt like he was maybe more prepared for life after the NBA than a lot of people.
I think he was. And you're right. If you heard any interview that Wayman did, and they would ask him what was his first love, he would tell you it was music. And with his father having been a pastor, music, of course, was a real big thing in their family. And there was times when he said it's he and his brothers and his dad. I mean, they were the music for the church sometimes. And it's true. When if he had a bad game, or if he would grab that guitar and he'd sit back. I mean, and it's, serenade himself, or it just took him away. It took him away. And so when, actually it was when we were in Sacramento, and one of his musician friends, and it's weird because musicians fall in love with athletes, and athletes have this, they have this, what is this thing when guys like it, what do they call it?
Bromance.
Yes, that's it. So he had so many musician friends that were crazy about him, and vice versa, because the musicians want to be athletes, and so one of his friends that was a huge musician, still is a big, huge jazz guy now, Marcus Miller. He told him one day, he said, "You know what?" He said, "You could do this for real." And Wayne was like, "Are you serious?" Because of course he said, "I just felt like I was just okay." He said, "No, Wayman, you can really be, I mean, a legitimate musician." And so he started buying gear. I'm listening to your incredible mics and headphones and your gear. And he started buying the things that he needed. And in the off season, he'd play around with it. And then finally I remember we would be in bed, and he had this little recorder, and he would hum something. And maybe 2 or 3 days later, he would ask me to come out in the studio, and it was a full song. Yeah. And it still amazed me all the years that we'd been, from 16 years old to even when he passed away. It was amazing to me that this few just humming sounds that he was make was a full-blown song, So, yeah, he really did love music. And music, when his father passed, that was the only time that really, truly the music stopped. It took him, I don't know, 4 or 5 months before he could do anything, before he can pick up. The guitar, nothing made him happy. He was grieving. And so when he was able to pick it back up, I remember that album being such an emotional thing for him. But yeah, music was his avenue of escape. Like they were going on road trips to play the Knicks and he would have that guitar over his shoulder, and then of course when Apple came out and you could actually record on, so he had his laptop, he had the guitar, and he literally, he would write songs when he was on the road for basketball.
That's cool.
Yeah, they have downtime in between games. Like it's good to have something to do.
Yeah, look, kept him out of trouble.
Yep. Yep. Transitioning back to the foundation, in the 9 to 10 years it's been active, what has been, like, other than people not being uninsured and prosthetics being very expensive, what else has come up that's been a sort of a problem you didn't foresee when you started doing this kind of work?
That there's politics in everything. And then something to me that I would feel like is so simple as, okay, guys, you see that there's a need. There's a need. And to me that it's just black and white. There's a need. So why are we fighting? And in my mind, it should be simple, but it's not. And I do understand checks and balances and whatnot, but I don't get that part of it.
Also, I feel like the way hospitals do their billing is incredibly confusing just to everyone. I'm like, why am I getting my third bill for this thing I thought I already paid?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I imagine that makes it difficult when you're trying to financially help someone in this case, because it's nearly impossible to predict what the cost of something is going to be.
So this is what we have to do. This past year, actually, we did it for 2 years. We had one recipient that was a child. We never had a child because, there's St. Jude's. There's so many places and organizations that have children. So we helped this little girl, Eden, and we knew it would take a while. And it's because children are constantly growing. So we did decide, okay, we're going to do 2 years, but we're going to cap how much money we're going to give. And that's what you have to do. So then that way there's no surprises, because I told him, I said, I was very, very leery about even accepting it, because I said, this baby, she's a baby. She's going to grow. And so, yeah. So everything we do with the foundation, it has to be cut and dry. This is how much money we're going to get. And then when we, did our deal with Scott Savage, which is the process is that, okay, this is what we get for this much money. And then, so no surprises, like you and I. So,
and that seems to be one of the hardest things with any foundation or anytime you're helping people, is because you have to balance helping as many people as possible, being good steward of the money that's there to do that, versus when you're dealing with individuals who need the help, trying to balance those two things.
Right. And I tell you, they'll send stories, and I'm something of a wimp when, depending on what things are, quite a few things, but in a bleeding heart. And if I feel like someone needs something, and if I could help them, I want to help them. But if I'm finally got to the place where I know that, okay, Regina, this is how much money we can spend per year, and this is what we have to do.
I was going to ask about the foundation. Like, is it at this point mostly funded by, outside donations, or is there a sort of a core from, when you began that you're able to use?
We initially it was outside. When Wayman passed, TNT, Charles Bark, his old teammates, money, and I still have things that come in from the NBA. A golf tournament every year. Initially, we did too. We would go to Oklahoma City and do a golf tournament, and which that divide that I talk about. So the Oklahoma City people would do one, and then that money would come here, and we do one here. And then we also, this year, it was the first time we did a gala, and I was so excited. It was so much fun. But with the gala, I've gone out and I've get some of his old teammates and or friends, and those guys are the speakers. And then Spud Webb, John Starks.
Spud Webb.
Those are their golfers. So they come. So then I get golfers, and then I have because my children are at OU with Tommy Harris and Adrian Peterson, and then Felix Jones. They were at Booker T together, and Felix was in Dallas, but then Felix went to Arc. Anyway, so I get those athletes to come in and to do the golf tournament. So it's golf tournament folk, and then when we did our initial launch for the Wayman Tisdale Foundation, we brought a jazz musician in. So actually, I've had 2 jazz musicians come in and do some things for us. So I keep my fundraising, the things that we do is around athletes and musicians. So
I'm curious, because the 90s NBA was my jam. How did Spud Webb and Wayman just meet, through the league, or were they?
Spud was with us in Sacramento.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. He was with us.
He gave every short person the dream that they could play in the NBA.
Yeah, gosh, I don't. And now to me, the NBA is rather small to me, because Spud did come along first, and then Muggsy Bogues came behind him, and so I was really upset when, from Louisiana, but he was at OU. Oh, I could see his face.
Hollis Price.
When Hollis didn't make it, I was like, well,
I know.
why not? And he was such a nice guy.
Yeah,
he was.
I loved Hollis, but
we were at OU at the same time.
Yeah.
As
Okay.
Hollis.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys were there. Our oldest daughter was there too. Then, yeah. And especially if you recognize Tommy Harris, because
Oh, yeah.
yeah, those are friends of my oldest daughter. So yeah, but I thought Hollis would make it, but I think he and Quantas both ended up in Europe somewhere.
Yeah, I think Hollis played for France at least for a little while because I remember seeing that. But yeah, it's again like the NBA is in comparison like the NFL and whatnot. The chances of actually making it to the big league is very small because almost every college has a basketball team, but there's only 12 people per NBA team. Yeah, that's not a lot.
Yeah, and I think I used to know the exact number, but there's only like 200 and something. 200 and I can't remember the name, but there's only 200 spots in all of in NBA.
Yeah.
And then you consider that guys stay 12. Now they're playing longer because they don't play. They're doing all that banging on the inside that Wayman and those guys did. You have someone as tall as Dirk, that played 17 years. And then Sam just did our gala. And so as we were sitting next to each other, before, and I don't know why I didn't know. He was the best man when we got married too. And I remember leaning over and said, "Hey, how many years did you play?" And when he told me 16, I was like, "Really?" But because usually someone a 6'11" guy, you usually don't, they're torn, it tears their bodies down. But it's something you said earlier too. When Wayman left at 12, he had teams calling, trying to get him to stay. I remember Danny Ainge called him over and over, and he's like, "Wayman, but you could still be making this much money." And Wayman's like, "It's not fun anymore." Right. But Wayman has something to do. So for guys that all they know is basketball, they have to stay because that's all they know.
If it's them having to ice their knees every second they're not playing the game, that's what they'll do.
And I remember Wayman saying that one time. He said, "I will not walk away here crippled." He said, I don't want it. And like I said, I don't know if you pay attention to, what is it with Shaq, Kenny Smith, and Charles, but when they go back to the board to write, have you paid attention to the way Kenny Smith walks?
I don't think I've noticed.
Okay, watch. Kenny was with us in Sacramento too, but watch. And sport, it beats him up bad. Yeah. Bad. And then I was just in LA a couple of weeks back, but Mitch Richmond just had knee surgery, and it's rough. It's rough.
I loved Mitch Richmond as a kid. Like, he was just like the perfect shot guard. Yeah. And, he was great in video games. So
yeah. I know you mentioned that trade to Sacramento was rough, but he did end up on a pretty fun team for a few years there.
He did, and we made some lifelong friends, and the NBA girlfriends, we get together every year. So we were in the LA area then, and then in October we just went back because Mitch and his wife Julie, they just lost their youngest son, and so I just went back. I had to turn around and go right back for a funeral, so it was not good, but we've just been friends forever. Oh gosh, some of us more than 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So speaking of fundraising for the foundation, other than donating on your website, which I saw there was a very large button. So well done there, web designer.
Yeah. We'll make sure and post a link to that.
Yes,
too,
we will.
So people can
we will.
That.
Do you have any of those golfing tournaments or events coming up that?
Everything that we do is September and October. And I don't know how I failed to miss Soul Fest, and I did, because we do that with GK in conjunction with GKFF, but and that thing too is a big music festival. Right. But so the Wayman Tisdale Foundation we're involved in that one in the sense of I just have to kind of show up. I love those, but they donate money every year to the foundation, and we were very, very involved, of course, in picking a talent and things like that for the festival. But it's turned out to be a very, very cool thing. I love it. I love music. So
a question just occurred to me, which is, since in the decade this foundation's been going on, has the cost of prosthetics gone up or down, or have they just become more sort of technologically advanced as they become more expensive?
You know what? The technology behind them is so amazing to me. But even when you and I were just mentioning surgery, medicine in itself is amazing. And so these things, a prosthetic device has like a Bluetooth chip. So and it has to be charged, you know, but it has this mechanism in it. For instance, if Wayman was walking and if he felt off balance, it has this thing in it. It would kick it out to help him with his balance, to keep him from falling.
Wow.
So it's amazing. But for us, I've not noticed a change in what we pay. And maybe Scott is just Savage is doing that for us. But I've not noticed an uptick, but I have noticed that they look a lot more robotic, but I think that's very cool. So
yeah,
I love the look. So yeah.
No, the more things they can do to help the person avoid re-injuring themselves, the better.
Right.
So
exactly.
So how many people have you helped?
9 or 10. 9 to 10. And this is the weird thing is I remember the places of where these people are from and their stories more than their names. This past year, it was Eaton, I remember, because she was our first baby. And the very first person we helped, he worked on his grandfather's farm and got caught in, it was ugly, but his grandfather promised to take care of things and then just decided not to. And he was only 24 or 5 years old. But this is funny. Not the accident. I remember it because he's from Hennessy, Oklahoma. I had never heard of Hennessy, Oklahoma. The only thing I know about Hennessy is Hennessy. Trying to do is 2 per year. And then sometimes we've had, 10. I miss Steve. So we have, because I can't think of his name, Hennessy, Oklahoma, Steve from the church, the coach at Jinx, Steve. We remember we had one woman and she just disappeared. We gave her the device and we don't know what happened. Then it was the African American girl that her whole family was there. Then it was the Hispanic guy, and then the one gentleman because he got up and danced and told me he was going to dance at his daughter's wedding. And thank you so much because some of these my eyes are so full of water when I talk to these people. And then one person was weird, fell off the porch, and then there was some type of infection set in that caused them to lose their leg. That's what I'm saying. I remember the stories better. And then Tommy Harris, Sr., Tommy's father. Tommy's from Killeen. He'd been going back and forth to the VA, and it was falling off. But I think what the VA does is they take parts that they had and they'll try to recreate, but you really can't recreate or use old parts to fit someone else because all of our anatomy is totally different, So then it was Mr. Harris. Then it was the girl in Okmulgee that was in a car wreck and her girlfriend died. They got hit. A guy decided that he wanted to commit suicide, so he goes on the other side of the lane and crashes into the car, kills her girlfriend, her childhood girlfriend, but then she lost. The one that survived lost her leg. So it was her and I don't know, and Eaton. So the last 2 is Eaton and Mr. Harris. So it's more than that then.
So at least 11?
Yes.
I'll keep in some of those stories. Those stories were fascinating because, I think either sports injuries or car accidents. Diabetes was in the back of my head, but I wasn't thinking that would be, well, and if you're giving, 2 people a year up to what, $20,000 to $30,000, you have to, those are decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, if you can help 2 people who, may have a prosthetic for a very long time.
Right.
Because like you said, it's not like you can easily reuse prosthetic.
I think they said that they could use like the actual point that's the joint or things like that, but the actual, socket that fits here and they can't. I mean, because it's all like they literally stick you in this stuff and make this mold around, to fit you. And so none of the 4 of us would fit one another's.
Right.
But
do they make the mold like before they amputate? Is that what they do?
No.
Okay.
We went Wayman had the surgery, and I think maybe 3 to 4 weeks later. I mean, and it just depends on how quickly you heal. Of course, Wayman healed a lot quicker than someone that was a diabetic because he didn't have any issues healing. So they had a horrible disease, but apparently, from what I'm learning now about someone that's diabetic, that's one of the big issue is healing. You know, so I guess when we don't have enough insulin, I don't know. Look, at one point I learned more about cancer than I ever cared for.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn about another one that, thank God, I don't have to. I just know the healing process is longer. That's what I know about diabetes. That's it.
Diabetes is bad. We can say that. We're going to go on that limb here on Pod for Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have an activity we do with our guests, which is that we have them sort of look around our nerd cave here and either pick out something that calls to them or something that confuses them. And we can explain.
Like to ask about.
Yes. And so we'll give you a minute or two to look around, and we'll of course edit out that part, which never sounds as natural as I would like it to, actually. But
what is blaring at me, and maybe because it's in my face, as the woman on the piano with the music and the fire.
Yes,
I've not yet read. I keep saying this music saved my life, and I didn't read the and music saves
me still.
Okay. And that makes so much sense to me. May not even have to explain it to me because I know what it did for Wayman. But you can. And who is Hurt Sumner? Alice Hurt Sumner.
So this painting was done by a Jinx high school student for a Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance Day art competition.
Cool.
And what she did was she's used a quote by a Holocaust survivor who used music to sort of survive the experience and painted
awesome.
it. And I always loved it. And it didn't win in the competition, but I asked her if I could keep it because I liked it so much. Okay. I wasn't a judge. I wasn't allowed to vote, but I loved it. And I was like, I'm talking to like a 16-year-old girl. I was like, can I keep your painting? She's like, yeah. I'm like, sweet. So, but yeah, so that's what that is. And that's also been chosen once before. This is exciting. It's good to see the rhythms of this.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, it's right there in my vision, and again, like I said, the music thing, but I don't know why. I just have read. I've sit here 2 or 3 times. I read the first line and didn't read the rest of it. Yeah. And my children and I, we talk about music all the time. Of course, we were always around it, and we still are. We really love it. And I was just telling my daughter last week. It was around Thanksgiving. I was having a rough day because holidays are still rough for me with Wayman being gone. And I heard something on the radio. And I told her, I said, gosh, that song sent me in a tailspin, Danielle. And I've been trying to pull myself out all day. And then we finally said, music evokes such a gamut of emotions. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. Some stuff we laughing like, oh gosh, that's trash. And then some things were like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. But it really does. I mean, it'll send me back to a place and time that Wayman and I were doing whatever, or not even 5 or 6 months ago. And this is something Wayman and I would do. If I'm driving and I'm listening to something in it and I feel like it's a super cool song, I would call him like, hey, I just heard this new song and it's blah, blah. And literally 6 months ago, the thought ran across my mind because it's something new. And I said, I'm going to call. And then I was like, no, you're not going to call him. And the crazy thing is he's been gone 10 years and I still have those little like brain fart things that I can still reach out, or I'm going to call him, and according to my therapist, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me.
And I feel like you can trust your therapist when they say that because it's in that person's best interest for you not to be okay. So that's an honest therapist right there.
Well, I mean, I decided that it really is true because it's just been October when Mitch and Julie Richmond lost their son, and she called me and she said, is it crazy that I go out to the cemetery? I was like, absolutely not. I said, what whatever you feel like doing is what you're supposed to do. And my friend here, it seems like she knows when I'm falling into the abyss, as I call it. And what she tells me and has been telling me for 10 years is, Regina, breathe. And so I now have been telling Julie, just breathe, Julie, just take a deep breath, because it seems like a cleansing breath kind of gets me past that little really rough spot. You'll be back there, but at least just take a deep breath. Just breathe. Just breathe. So
that's good advice for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again so much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of Pod for Good. If you want to find out more about the Wayman Tisdale Foundation, you can go to their website, which is waymantisdale.org, and make sure you have your speakers up, because you'll hear some sweet, awesome Wayman Tisdale jazz music when you go visit the website. To keep up with what Podcast for Good is doing, please like our Facebook page, which is Podcast for Good. You can follow us on Twitter at pods4good. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Get it done, TULSA.